but it has been,
stop watching Fox or CNN or whatever you watch all day. Thank you. Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to TRD Talks. I'm E.B. Salamont. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we start, we're talking about the Hamptons market today. But before we start, I want to thank our sponsor, Adam Miller of the Adam Miller Group. And Adam has a few words for us all.
Sure. Thank you for having me, The Real Deal, and for these wonderful virtual events that I've tuned into quite often as a distraction from homeschool news and Netflix and everything else. Thank you, panel, for participating in this event. I know you all very well for 20 years, so I think they made a great choice of people on the panel, so I commend them on that. I wanted to say how proud I am to be part of this Hamptons community. Especially now when we have so many of our clients out here currently. It's been extraordinary to see the sort of breadth of this local community during this time. I think so many people who are spending time here realize now that this is much more than a summer community, something we've all known for quite some time. For myself, this is an area I've called home for almost 20 years now. I left a large firm in Manhattan to move out here back in 2002. Judi will know that because she used to work with my wife at the time. Cody and Susan and I have worked on some great deals in the past and continue to. So I really wanted to just create a law firm that was responsive to so many of our New York City folks and local folks who need sort of regular counsel on land use and real estate, and I'm proud to be a sponsor of the event. So thank you for participating.
Great, thank you so much. So before we get started, I want to just quickly introduce everybody. So like I said, I'm E.B., I write for The Real Deal. I'm going to go clockwise here. So we have Judi Desiderio, who is CEO of Town & Country. Hi, Judi. We have
Thanks,
Cody Vichinsky, co-founder. Cody Vichinsky, co-founder of Bespoke Real Estate, and finally Susan Breitenbach of the Corcoran Group. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
Thanks for
Before we
having us.
start, sure. Just to kick us off, I wanted to hear from each of you. Tell me where you are and tell me what it looks like for you right now in terms of just when you do leave the home. How do things feel? Do they feel empty? Are you running into people when you're walking around? Any of you can start. It's just a conversation.
I'll start. I'm pretty out and about on a daily basis. We have a routine walk. I drive a lot. I check in my office. All of our employees are working remotely, except for my brother and I. So we are spending a lot of time in close quarters, covering a lot of ground. But it's bizarre because there's so many people who are out here, but the restaurants are not busy and businesses aren't necessarily flourishing the way they would be in a summer capacity. But it seems that the energy is on the brink of the summer season. So I see a lot of my clients walking, and if I'm driving, we touch base, we stay on the other side of the road, what have you, but we're spending a lot of time on the phone with people who are in their house. And so it's a bizarre feeling. I'm sure a first of its kind for everyone on the panel here to have your friends and your network all kind of in one concentrated place, but not the ability to necessarily socialize the way we've been doing in the past.
Yeah, I was curious about that because I think that for some of us who are in the city or who are not kind of in a smaller geographical space, like we're not really interacting much. So I've been curious, if you do venture out to the market, if you see people or, or what have you.
I can tell you.
Supermarket feels like going to war a little bit. Sorry, Susan, go ahead.
I haven't been there in a month and a half at all. So it's very strange. I've never worked so hard in my life. So thank God we have work because we're just really keeping busy. But we try to take a walk on the beach for an hour a day. And at least get out for a little bit, but it's a whole nother way about doing business and working, and it's very strange. It's, no restaurants are open, and it's as busy as it is in 4th of July, but it's cold, a little bit colder, and no restaurants open and such. So everybody seems to be making do with everything.
When did everyone's network start coming out? I think a few weeks ago I talked to a broker who said that he got a call from a client who was in the car, bags packed, and was like, "I'm coming out. I'll be there in 3 hours." But when did you all start to experience just everyone coming?
First week in March, because I looked at I had a rental where they came out. They wanted oceanfront. They needed it that day. They needed to move in by the weekend. It was like March 10th or 12th, right around there, where it was like getting frenetic, starting to get really frenetic. People just wanted to come out here.
So. It was really
the more
when the
severe drop in the market.
Down. Yeah, when the city started to close non-essential businesses, and particularly when the schools got shut down. When the schools got shut down, it was a mass exodus, and rentals were off the charts, and people were renting things sight unseen, as they still are right now. So that was, I think, when the real thrust of it came, was when they closed the school.
Yeah. And what kind of inventory was there at the time? And now, is there anything left in terms of rental? Seriously.
At the time, we didn't have a way to search. We never had a search engine for March or April. Now we do. But so it was really hard, right, Judi? It was like, or Cody, it was like, just word of mouth, and like, who's going to rent, and like calling people, and just, it was like chaos.
We're in uncharted waters. We've never seen anything quite like this before. But I think that the landlords have been very sensitive to the situation. The tenants kind of really came out almost in a panic about wanting to get out of the city, needing to get out of the city, needing the wide open spaces and the fresh air. And I think that really was the impetus for it.
Mm-hmm. Cody, were you going to say something?
As Cody said, we have like summer population out here right now, something we've never had in April before.
With pools open.
Yeah.
Pools open. And landscaping.
I think it was about guiding people adequately, because, as Judi said, we're in uncharted territory. And back in early March, the equity markets were obviously in a weird place. And the energy of everything was just relatively peculiar and unfamiliar. So there's also talking to our landlord clients and guiding them, because they didn't know if certain people were going to be in their house for more than a few weeks, a few months, and also, certain rental legislation is now in effect out here, in which it wasn't in the prior years. So that also took prominence in the conversation. So there's a lot of talking in an unfamiliar format, because, again, we're all kind of flying by the seat of our pants and matching people up appropriately.
Right. How did the new legislation sort of change things, like in the past month? How did it impact?
You mean the new rental law?
Yeah.
The new rental law and the new leases. Well, I think COVID-19 changed things more. Susan and Cody, will you attest to this? Before C-19, we were being dominated by short-term rentals from Airbnb and HomeAway and VRBO. Once the virus hit, people no longer wanted anybody in their house for a week or two. Short-term rentals, you never knew who was there before you, who's coming after you. So landlords and tenants totally pumped the brakes. And we went back to, I want the full season. I want it from March or April through September. I want a year round. So it kind of was nice to go back to full season rentals and no longer the short term, immediate gratification. Let's have a party for 2 weeks.
Right. And then what about inventory now for rentals? Is there any? I mean, I was joking, but I am curious.
I think it's broad. You have to talk about, segment specific inventory. At a base level, there's a lot of homes. So if you had $30,000 to spend, it's going to look very different for the guy who has 1.5 million to spend. I could say year over year, the absorption of inventory now versus last year, we're in a whole different ballpark. We have a very saturated market. There's not a lot of optionality. There's people who are definitely fitting round pegs in square holes. in the process. So from at least my vantage point on the very high end, I think we're all but out. I was just on the phone with another broker locally. I asked him, I was like, do you have anything on the ocean? Because I have 3 people who want to be on the ocean. And I was like, yeah, they all want tennis. And he started laughing. He was like, yeah, good luck with that. So it depends on what you're looking for.
I think we got some more because some of these high-end sales, they are throwing furniture in, and, they thought, wow, it's not going to sell the second. So let's just make some money. And they are asking very high prices. I have one at just like $1 million, just got furnitures coming this week, which I'll tell you about later, Cody, if you're looking, but it's not, so we're still having some. We also have some of those short-term people that did come out for just out of the city quickly that one weekend. They were afraid to get stuck in the city. They thought they were going to close the city and rented for a month or two, not knowing. And now they're up and they don't want to go back. So we do have, I think, quite a few of those too, that are now looking for the full season.
But on the flip side too, I apologize. Plenty of our, let's say historical renter clients, they've opted to take their homes and not rent their homes. They also need a place to go. So there's a whole other element of that, is balancing the people who need their houses because there's uncertainty of what's to come. So it's a lot of juggling.
They're not going to Capri, no.
Exactly.
Well, actually, someone just put in our Q&A slot, what happens to the property that maybe had sorry about that, guys. What happens to a property that maybe an owner signed a lease for the summer but maybe wants it, or now the owner is there but like there's a lease. Do you know what I mean?
A few of those.
Really?
Yeah,
so
quite a few.
It's a problem. Yeah. I just had one like that, and they bought it back for part of the time and it almost ended up in a lawsuit. He said, I have nowhere to go. And I guess it's uncharted territories. What's the judge going to say? Right. So they kind of worked it out. So they gave him 2 weeks and they're figuring it out. But it's a problem because, some of them don't want to go back to New York, or they don't know what where to go. So sometimes you find you're looking for a rental for the landlord now.
Right.
Rented his house.
Right. What about
some people are trying to buy themselves out of the lease? So we have landlords that want to stay in their house now because of the situation, as Susan was saying. And so they're trying to buy their way out of the lease and situate the tenant in another rental. And that happens, unfortunately, right now, more often than we'd like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. What about some of the people who came out as renters? Are any of them turning into potential buyers?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's helping our market because I think, some of these, like the one that I, said on the ocean, that they decided they don't want to leave and they don't want to spend another $1.5 million for rent. So they're trying to, they're buying. So I think it's helped our market in a way. A lot of people are finding the Hamptons to be a year-round place, and they're liking it in April and March, even though it's not July weather. So I think it's going to help our market this year.
And I think for some people the rental process can be seamless, but for a lot of people it's an arduous undertaking. And you're moving into someone else's home. It's not like you're checking into the Four Seasons, so the entirety of it can be taxing. So I think for a lot of folks that are looking long-term and they're analyzing the market and they went through the process, they start to say to themselves, who knows what this is going to look like in a year or 2 years, or what the long-term effects are going to be. So the psychology is open to looking at an acquisition as well as a rental. So I would say unless that rental is seamless or the economics of the rental are really, perfect for that individual, a purchase right now is definitely something that has been on the minds and in the tongues of many folks, at least that I'm experiencing. I'm sure you guys are seeing the same.
Yeah, exactly. It is very similar to that action after 9/11. After 9/11, there was a big push for people to literally relocate and have a place out here. I think now, though, it's not necessarily that they're moving out here full time, although 10,000 baby boomers are retiring I think that what we're seeing is we're seeing people who want an alternative. They're not going to give up their place in the city, but they need to have a place so that if the city shuts down, which this is one virus, and will it happen again? The likelihood's pretty good. They want a place. So I think the Jersey Shore, upstate New York, Florida, the Carolinas, and particularly the Hamptons, because it's so easy to get in and out from our area, from the city. I think that we get a big bump up.
You know, after the first few weeks, as people who had second homes were going to those second homes, and as people were fleeing the city for, the shore, there was some talk, there was some local press like, hey, don't flood us, stay home, don't come to your summer homes right now. What do you all think of that?
I think the idea of, again, nobody knew where this was going to go, and the severity of it. So I think people's first knee reactions are like, just stay away from me, and I'm staying away from you. And I think that's the general reaction. I think it's kind of a ridiculous notion to tell people they can't use property that they own. In general, if I was in the city and I owned a beach house in the Hamptons and I had a family, I'd be gone. So I think it's a relatively preposterous notion. But I do understand the reason why there was some sort of concentrated effort to say, let's kind of keep everybody where they are and restrict all movement, no matter if it's to or from.
Right. And I guess maybe, you totally have a point about, like if you own a piece of property, but maybe there's more tension if, like I don't own a property and I go out and I rent something. And now I'm one of those people at the supermarket that's making it more like a war zone.
Well, I think the supermarkets just weren't ready for August activity in March. That's really what it was. I don't really feel the them and us thing that some people are asking about. I think that there's more of a sense of community. I think, Cody, you mentioned that before. I think that people are really coexisting nicely. When you go and you take your bike down to the beach, people go to the other side of the road if you're on one side. So I find that people are very respectful.
Yeah, I think it's calmed down a little bit. I think in the beginning people were a little crazy about it, which I felt was a bit ridiculous myself. But they have a right to use their houses out here, and just as long as everybody is just safe. And I think it's they're listening to the guidelines and staying away from each other. And there are people walking on the beach, and I think it's been fine.
Will say though, sorry, EB, last comment about it is that, again, I'm out and about all day and I go to the supermarket and my wife, she says, we need fruits and veggies. Like I gear up, I wear my hazmat suit, I get in there. The local community and the local infrastructure, and we shop in Cullen and I go to Red Horse Market and I talk to various business owners. I'm constantly amazed of the professionalism and the planning that's in place. And when they did get walloped, for let's say August activity in March, they adapted and they did what they needed to do. So if you go in the supermarkets now, it's as normal as it would be any day of the week. So the local community here, like you got to tip your hat because they reacted amazingly in a time where I think nobody knew what was coming down the road, and they handled it excellently.
They're all helping each other too, which is really nice. They're delivering, and the lady from Provisions has been amazing, and calling and say, I don't have this and I'm sorry. I'm like, they're all, I think, all banding together and really doing the right thing and helping each other in a time where there's a lot of uncharted territory. It's really nice to see. I agree.
Right. So
it's really like real estate too. If you look at the real estate professionals, I think that we've adapted in so many ways. We're showing and selling and listing in means that we never had to adjust to before.
Yeah, it's definitely a different.
Tell me a little bit about if you're representing either a seller or a buyer or a tenant or landlord, how are you going about it? Are you doing showings kind of with protective gear? Or are you doing virtual? What is everyone doing?
Well,
make yourself.
New York State came down with that we could not do face-to-face showings.
Okay.
So you were barred from doing face-to-face showings. So of course we all start with photographs and we start with videos and we start with virtual tours. And then you do that. I'll sit in my car while you walk around the property, and then you
Here in the window.
then you say, put on your hazmat suit and take your shoes off at the door, and I'll open every door and drawer. Don't touch anything. And but believe it or not, sales are happening and rentals are happening without them even walking around the property. So people feel the need to take care of this now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Cody and I had a story that we were going to tell before. Was how I spent my Easter Sunday with him. But we had a owner who did his own videos, 30-second videos, so we can put them in a link and send. So Cody sent to his buyer, and then the buyer was in Florida. So Cody comes on Easter Sunday. I meet him in the driveway. I'm 20 feet away. He's 20 feet away. He's FaceTiming the outside. And the owner's in the doorway with the door open, yelling at us, okay, don't forget the apartment. And we had a signed contract as of yesterday. So a total virtual sale. So the guy's never been there yet.
First of my career, yeah.
I hope he likes it. He likes it when he gets
me too.
Tell us a little more about this. Like, are you able, I mean, as much as you can say, where it is and like what price point are we in terms of a virtual sale? I've been trying to wrap my head around the idea of someone literally buying something sight unseen.
Without seeing it, with not even peering in a window. He hasn't even been on step foot on the property.
It's an $8 million price point, but more importantly, I think it speaks to the nature of our clientele. And this particular individual, he knows the Hamptons, he knows what he's looking for. He has a real sense of synthesizing the market and information, and so it doesn't take much for him. He didn't necessarily need to over scrutinize it, because he already had comfortability with it, So there's a few different people in the process right now that are actually going through this exact same motion with me, and some people they want to engage, but just physically there's something pulling them back. They can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, something.
It's an offer, but to sign a contract, sign a contract and put money down without actually ever stepping foot on the property. I've only done that once or twice before in all the 30 years. So.
Right.
And then
we've all done it, and someone's buying either a tear down or a piece of land, and they're very familiar with this road and neighbors and whatnot. So we've all done that over the years. But if someone's actually buying a residence that they're going to keep the residence in place, it's very unusual to have them sign a contract without ever stepping inside.
Was the person looking for a really long time? Can we get a little more No?
Yeah, no, he wasn't. I think, again, circumstances just led him to say, now is the right time in my life. So what do you got? We boiled the market relatively fast. We narrowed in, and, it was a relatively productive few days there. That we
Not an easy deal, but it was good.
It was good. Yeah.
Was there any conversation about just okay, I'm really doing this? I mean, just in my head, I'm wondering,
No. I think it's all relative. And you have to think that way, so when you're stepping into someone else's psychology, it's hard to necessarily deliver your own thoughts and perspectives. And I think as a professional, you could say, hey, man, are you sure, this is the way you want to go about it? But at the same time, I don't think applying my psychological parameters to somebody else's is necessarily the best thing for my business or for his needs.
Right.
The one thing he was concerned about, which is quite interesting, which will probably come up in your conversation, is no contingency for a mortgage, but was mortgaging, but wanted to make sure he had the time with the bank to get the mortgage. Right. It's with what's going on, things are taking a little bit longer. They're getting it, and qualified people are getting it, but it's just taking a little longer because of the way what's going on. So that was one of the only concerns.
As brokers, how do you market a property at a time like this? How do you do it in a way that's tasteful and appropriate and responsible to your seller, but not in a way that's overly aggressive when there's a pandemic happening?
It's a great question. I think there's a myriad of ways. For us, we believe in hyper-targeted marketing to people who we know who are in the market right now. So broadly speaking, we still want to keep doing things, digital advertising, promoting on social, and that's more of a wider net, to just continue to speak to our niche and our audience, or throughout the world. But in order to actually have transactions occur and engage in a material way, we're focusing our efforts and our energy through various methods and mediums to those who we know are likely to transact or engage in our community, in our market. So we've kind of narrowed down and tightened up the scope, and we're putting much more resources into the one-to-one right now than we are into the broad.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's flashing anything around, just exactly doing the same thing.
Right. You're targeting the market very specifically in digital.
Without anyone having a crystal ball, how would you anticipate kind of the official spring/summer season evolving from here? How does it change at this point? Or does it just keep building?
I'll take it. I'm running top down. I see everybody in order. So I think the biggest issue this market faces, and again, Bespoke, we primarily focus on 10 million above, is going to be a lack of inventory. I think absorption rates coming out of Q4 and Q1, I think we can all agree, some of the most unprecedented momentum that we've seen in years. So we just had great velocity. And I think Q2 figures will also dictate a very robust Q2 in the upper portions of the market because you'll see closings. So I think those that are in the market and that have been in the market, and typically if you're buying an asset of that price point, it's either really fast, or you could take 2 years, 5 years. So there's definitely astute people in the market who've been following inventory. But if you really boil it down and you say, all right, oceanfront inventory, how many properties on the market? Between Southampton and East Hampton, right now there's 16 properties for sale. So in reality, you may say that's a lot. There's 295 properties on the market. That puts you basically, and if you cut it in half of just beyond land, but actual physical properties you can move into, you're dealing with maybe roughly 3% of the overall market. So our markets, because they're land-based markets, are finite in inventory, and the developer pipelines on the high end are relatively, drained. There's not much coming. So I think the biggest issue we're going to see is a lot of momentum coming into the Hamptons market because of COVID. And I think Judi put it perfectly. It's the first time since 9/11 where there's a merger between desire and necessity, for those who want to be out here. And then it's just going to boil down to, does the acquisition and the program fit our parameters, which I think is something to really consider.
So which segment of the market do you think would be the strongest, sort of when offices are open and when people are kind of ready to do it? Are we talking like the 2 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 up?
I think it's going to be a broad stroke. I will tell you, the high end right now in the first quarter did very well. Over 10 million did very well, as we all know. But moving forward, I think that we are seeing anything from the $1 million home to the $40 million home, where if somebody's ready to do this, and there have been a lot of people sitting on the fence. We had an incredible winter, the busiest winter we've had in over a decade. So that came to a screeching halt when COVID just started. Now we're starting to see that activity pick back up again with people saying, okay, I sat it out. I looked at what was going on. I know I need this. I know I want this. I'm going to do it now. And you're going to find, I think all markets are going to pick up for the second half of the year. Because remember, all market reports are a view in the rearview mirror. Everything that we report on closed 3 months prior. Right. Or was activity from 3 months prior. You sign your contract and then it takes 2 months and then it's another month. And part of the problem with the first quarter report was that the municipalities had closed down. So lawyers couldn't get their closing docs in. So the first quarter report looks worse than it really was.
Got it. Is that now moving?
They're still closed. You can't you can't record anything. All the municipalities are closed. So it's very curious what we're going to be seeing moving forward.
You got to give it up to the attorneys too. Adam Miller, and specifically, I have several deals running with him right now. These guys are slammed, and they're slammed remotely, just like the brokers. So, I speak specifically for his office and a few others. They've done an exceptional job in turning contracts around, keeping their clients managed, and getting these transactions closed when everything is on relative thin ice.
Yeah, they're all at home. Like, and Adam and his group, it's so funny. He's like, I'm on the 2:00, and Brian's got the morning, and I got this one, but they're all on top of it. So I'm doing the same thing with Adam and a bunch of others, but he's been amazing. So
if you're just joining us, or if you weren't with us for the beginning, Adam is our sponsor today. So thank you, Adam. And actually, there was a question from someone who's tuned in, a legal question, and it's whether there are protections in the contracts for buying sight unseen.
Great question.
We've been asked about COVID clauses.
No.
But COVID clauses.
Okay, wait. Let's do the sight unseen clause first. So, Cody, you don't know, not yet, or?
No,
I don't do a lot of sight unseen.
Nobody would ever sign that.
Okay.
No seller would ever sign that, saying, okay, if you come now and you don't like it, you get your money back. No.
Right.
That's not happening.
All right. So, Judi, what about the COVID clauses?
Well, the COVID clause is basically, it's fear-driven. If the world cracks open and sucks us all in, do I still have to move? From a seller's perspective. From a buyer's perspective, if all of a sudden the banks just shut the valve off, what's going to happen? And oddly enough, as Susan, I think you were saying it, we have more people borrowing now. Normally our deals are all cash deals, but they're borrowing, it's not subject to. They're borrowing 50% because money's so cheap right now. So I think people are just asking for a back door out of the contract. Whether that flies or not depends on the buyer and the seller and the lawyers.
So far, has it been flying?
Some of the time. With the parameter of, if we are all shut down and we can't close and we can't move, they're thinking getting worse than where it is now versus getting better.
It's like a cousin of force majeure. It's like the same concept, and they're just adding another byline into that paragraph of a contract and saying, like, God forbid, a tidal wave comes and knocks out the house, and it's in God's hands at that point. Do I still have to buy it? It's basically a variant.
Well,
but that's a good question for Adam.
In the leases, I think there's a lot of the leases, they're putting something in, because it says the landlord can show the house or whatever. None of these people that are coming out from New York to not be around people, they don't want people coming through the house. So that's been a clause we've been adding in a lot of the leases, just about showing,
right,
by appointment with the landlord, but you're not coming through here, to show the house. That's not happening. That's not happening this year unless something happens, sooner.
So if a client contacted you and wanted to list, what would you advise them? Would you advise them to list? Like, when would you tell them is the most ideal time?
Depends on the house and the owner. But if you're painting with a broad brush,
if it's vacant, as soon as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Why not? We have the buyers, we have the people. Yeah, as long as they don't mind moving out.
The people who are hesitant are the people who are occupying their homes. Those are the only sellers who are a little bit hesitant to wait and see until they start to open up business again.
Okay.
Our listing procurement pipeline is pretty good. And I think, again, a lot of people, they wanted to sell. And they still want to sell. It just may, like Susan was saying, the caveat is that we don't want to close until the end of the season. That's a bigger conversation than it is not wanting to sell. Certainly people have been like, please take my property off the market. For these reasons, I don't want people coming through my house. I'm elderly, whatever it may be. But for the most part, I think people want to continue as normal.
Mm-hmm. This time of year, we normally, when negotiating a house that's selling, the closing date does become a bone of contention. even before this. So whenever you're putting a deal together and it's March, April, people are like, well, can I keep July? Do I have to move out before then? And the buyer's like, well, no, I want it. This year, it's become such a bone of contention that it's actually killed some deals.
Really? In what, like,
sellers want to stay in, buyers want to get out, and no one wants to move on that. So they move on to a different property.
Right.
It kills deals this time of year, every year. You know, like
Yes.
I'm literally like, you know, like, get out of your house. And I tell the other guy, just go somewhere else for a few months.
I lost a $40 million because they were having a party on Labor Day weekend. I said, you can't let them have it for the weekend? Are you kidding? Yeah, it is a bone of contention always. You're absolutely right.
Okay, wow. How is, you know, with the stock market doing what they're doing, how have people, you know, with, you know, who've seen their net worth change, how have they been reacting in terms of either putting a search on hold or looking to sell, or anything like that?
It's another great question. Again, it's very case by case. You could try and create buckets for people. Some people definitely put their searches on hold. Some people own property out here. It wasn't this mad dash to sell it, but you know, they want to translate the asset into liquidity. You know, there's other people who are financially fine and want to sell their home now even more because there's better buying opportunities in their arena that they make money in. There's other people though that they may be worth $400 million and they took a 30% hit to their net worth. They're still going to do things for their lifestyle and their program. So I think you can't, again, paint with a broad brush, as Judi said perfectly. I think it's all about analyzing very specific people who have very specific goals and needs.
But I think we also have a very special clientele out here too, like the very top percent of people too. So it's, as you said, that their net worth may come down, but it's still not, they're still going to come to the Hamptons.
But we have seen there are deals that either people pump the brakes, put it on hold, or try to renegotiate the contract. You know, whenever you have occurrences like this, that's what happens. People reevaluate their specific needs, their specific position, and then they try and use that as a platform to either renegotiate, postpone, or push it forward.
Yeah.
So in terms of some of the deals that you've seen over the past few weeks, were these all deals that had been in the works for a while? I mean, except for the one virtual that we've already talked about, but for some of the deals that, you know, maybe get the headlines in the paper or don't, were these all things that were in play for a while?
We have
a bunch of new stuff coming up, and all new, including the one with Cody, but quite a lot. And then some of them that are rented are buying now too, that are out here to rent.
We've done.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Evie. Sorry.
Okay, I'm going this time, Cody. So, so Susan, so for the new ones, at what point did they start the process with you?
You want to talk?
You're talking
Cody?
to Susan or me? You're talking to anybody?
All right.
Well, we
tell you about the one that I just told you about. Go ahead.
We've got a little bit of everything. There are people who literally are jumping in right now and they're ready. And there's others who had started their search before this happened. Okay. And as I said before, they may have pumped the brakes. We even had people who initially were very slow about making a decision. And this happened and it catapulted them into, I need to get something now. I need to buy something now. I need to be out there next month. And so it depends. There's so many different people and so many different variables in so many different hamlets and price ranges. And it's very deal upon deal specific.
Okay.
We have Bespoke has 9 contracts executed right now, 3 of which were pre-COVID. And then, 66% have been post-COVID. And again, they're case by case and they're very specific, but one of the ones that was pre-COVID, I'll give you an example. It closed already and it was a significant deal. While it was in contract, we had someone who wanted to overpay for the contract. So it's all, again, circumstantial, where some are going to go like this and others are going to go like that. It depends on the product and, the positioning of it, because most people, again, on the very high end out here are relatively astute about what they're looking at, and they really understand the market dynamics. So there's definitely going to be a renewed vigor in the marketplace, and we're all experiencing it right now. But there's definitely going to be some folks, as Judi said perfectly, like they're going to need to pump the brakes or bow out or change trajectory. It's not going to be for everybody. But we feel good about what we're experiencing as a whole and as a market.
Okay, got it.
Are you both feeling, Susan and Cody, are you both feeling that initially there was a pause and now people are going back into forward momentum?
Yes, absolutely. In the beginning, they were in shock. They just wanted to come here, maybe the rent, but then, yeah, absolutely. Now it's kind of calmed down, and they're saying whether, I think 9/11, this, anything else, it just makes them, see this because it's more of a year-round community.
Right. And so
and continue.
So it's like a little bit of a new normal type of scenario as well.
Right.
We haven't hit the new normal yet. We're still centrifuge.
Right. I think everybody, brokers in general too, and we all looked at the fragility of everything. Our own assets, our market, our pipelines, and we were all in that same boat together with our clients. So, it was kind of a bizarre time, and that was in a weird way for everybody. So I think we all kind of take solace in that too, that it wasn't necessarily isolated to just the Hamptons brokerage community or New York City brokers or whatever it may be. As a world, we experience a tumble.
Mm-hmm. So a few of you have mentioned 9/11 and how this sort of feels similar. Just thinking back to previous cycles, what would you anticipate in terms of potential return to normal? Once obviously the biggest issue is health and safety, but in terms of looking back at previous cycles, how does this compare, at least so far?
I don't think you can compare this to anything, and no one knows where the end is, and no one can identify all the tentacles that are going to come out from this. So I'm looking at it, and I've been through the 87 crash and some bull markets and recessions, and this is almost like the 87 crash and 9/11 combined with no end. Right. And that's what's making people really reevaluate. But it's kind of nice. Mother Earth has hit the reset button. We have better air quality and water quality all around the planet than we've had in many, many years. And I'm finding that people are going back to just really knowing that food, clothing, and shelter are really the most important things, and family first.
Mm-hmm. Susan, what about you? What does it feel like for you?
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of reset a little bit. I agree with that. Food, family, and friends, and martinis. I don't know. I think everybody's eating and drinking a little bit too much, but it's hopefully it's all going to calm down, and I think I'm pretty optimistic that everything is going to be fine. I think in the beginning people were dreaming about it, and but I think it's kind of calmed down a bit, and everybody is cooking and eating and talking on the phone a lot and FaceTiming, and I think everybody's getting quite good at all those things, but it makes you really feel what's important, which is safety and family and health and all that.
And having a home with space around it to come to.
Yeah, that too.
Cody, do you think the market will return to normal, say in a year from now, assuming it's a V-shaped recovery?
Take out that crystal ball, Cody. Here.
Yeah, exactly. I think I will talk macro for a second, just domestic real estate and luxury real estate. I think urban markets are not going to return to normal for the foreseeable future. I think people's entire way of living is going to, at least for some time to come, be much more cautious and dynamic I do think luxury markets, small batch destinations, Palm Beach, Aspen, those kind of luxury destinations, Malibu, they'll thrive. I do think that, now is a time where people are looking at their lifestyle, are looking at, as we were all alluded to, health and time and family, and they're recollecting themselves. So I don't think the market is going to rebound as a total. I do think certain markets are going to outperform other markets on a year-by-year basis. But, if you're speaking specifically about New York City or other urban markets, I think that's an entirely different, complex conversation that necessitates a statistical outlook and also a scientific outlook as to how their lives are going to shift. So it's a convoluted answer for a convoluted question.
Judi, were you going to add something?
No, I think that he covered a very broad stroke, and it really depends on where you are. As we said, the markets are so varied out here, and we're still one little microcosm. If you're looking across the country, or you're looking at the city, or you're looking at commercial real estate and how it's affecting landlords and tenants, and there are so many moving parts to this. I don't think it would be good for me to just zap one.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to wrap up with that because we are out of time, unfortunately. But before I do, I want to just thank our sponsor, Adam Miller, once more. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, all of you, for doing this with me this afternoon. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, guys.